welcome to another episode of the League of Champions Fantasy Show, where we want to help you be the champion of your league. And by doing that, obviously we've got week 5 coming up, so I, Naith, am here to help you try and win your week 5 fantasy matchups. Chris isn't here, as you can see. He's got a case of the old contract hamstring like Devontae Adams at the moment. No, I'm joking. He's got a family wedding that he's got this weekend, so understandably he can't join us today, but it's okay. I'm here to help you. So just before we get into everything, if you have a question on a particular player or a game for either the recap or the recap article or the previous show, please send it in. Equally, if you've got a player you want to submit for 20 questions in a story of the fantasy relevance of said player for you, you can let us know any of that by emailing at LOCFantasyShow@gmail.com or reaching out to us on social media. We've got the LOC Fantasy Show page on Facebook, our LOC Fantasy Show subreddit. We've got an account there, LOC_Fantasy_Show. So if you see us there as well, say hello. We're on X at LOC Fantasy Show, Instagram LOC Fantasy Show, and TikTok LOC.Fantasy.show. So let's get straight into it by just tying a bow on week 4 before we move on to anything else. So we've got the League of Champions and League of Donkeys candidates for week 4 to get to. So without further ado, our League of Champions candidate for week 4 is none other than Ken Walker. He had 116 combined yards and 3 touchdowns in the return from his oblique injury when he took on the Lions. Good for 29.6 fantasy points. So yeah, really good day there from Ken Walker. Very worthy League of Champions candidate for week 4. And on the League of Donkeys side of things, unfortunately, we are putting up Carson Steele for the League of Donkeys as the week 4 candidate. He obviously had a good first week as a starter. Probably got a lot of people excited that they've got the Chiefs' new running back. But he was quite inefficient, had a fumble that really cost him the job. As we saw, Kareem Hunt came in and finished off the game and played quite well. Carson Steele only had 6 yards and a fumble on 3 touches with a negative 1.4 point day. So yeah, he is very much the League of Donkey candidate of the week. We'll just tie up our Kings and Peasants, see how me and Chris did on those in week 4 as well. Both of me and Chris actually had a pretty good week. Our Kings, my Kings got 80.3, Chris's Kings got 61.78, so I did outpace him there. However, my Peasants had a fairly good week at 70.38, whereas Chris has only had 39.04 points. So Chris definitely beat me in the Peasants category, meaning Chris goes to 3-1 with the net score of the week of 22.74 against my score of 9.92. But I am putting an asterisk against this win for you, Chris, because you had 2 quarterback kings. Because you tried to pick Kyler Murray, who I should have just let you pick in hindsight, because I would have won if you did, because he did not do so well. But you also had Justin Fields, and because you were allowed to average the score, that gave you basically an extra 10 points, because Justin Fields was a pretty good king, to be fair to you. I had Darnold as my king, by the way, so I did pretty good there as well. But not only that, you had Anthony Richardson as your peasant, who got injured, which again is a massive cop-out, so you get a big old asterisk for your win there, Chris. I also had Goff as my peasant. Let's not talk about that, because he did pretty good. I'm surprised how well he did against... I mean, can we just ask you for a second? Jared Goff, 100% completion percentage. What a day. I mean, he's not doing that against some schmucks either. That Seahawks pass defense has been pretty damn good so far. So for him to do that, they're in a big spot. Yeah, really good by him. Running backs wise, we nailed it. I had Brian Robinson and Chris had Aaron Jones. We both had Ramondre Stevenson as our peasant, which we did really well with. George Pickens was an okay receiver king for me. Brandon Ayuk for Chris, not so much. Still wasn't quite getting it going. I had Garrett Wilson as my receiver peasant, and he didn't do much, so I was good there. Chris picked Courtland Sutton, who I thought, again, Chris was flying with the mirror there, but he got dinged by him because he had just got a touchdown on the Jets. Darce Goddard was my Titan king. It was okay. Mike Gesicki was a disaster for Chris. He got negative points. I think it was minus 0.9. He ended up with minus 9 receiving yards. Kelsey wasn't the greatest of peasants for me. He came alive, unsurprisingly, I suppose, with Rashee Rice going down. Chris did okay with Dalton Kincaid. We both had Greg Zuerlein as our king, who did well. Our peasants were okay with Cameron Dicker and Kami Fairbairn. We both had the Chiefs D as our king, which again was okay. I got burned by the Ravens D. It was the Ravens D and Goff that stung me for my peasants last week. And Chris had a good call on the Dolphins D, so hopefully you listened to him and you avoided streaming them. So yeah, Chris with an asterisk goes to 3-1. I fall to 1-3 on the Kings and Peasants. We'll now go to the Thursday Night Football recap. So, on Thursday Night Football this week, we had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going to the Atlanta Falcons. This was a juicy game going in because I think the Bucs were 3-1. Yep, only losing to Denver here. Meanwhile, the Falcons at 2-2. 2-2. Looking to obviously try and keep up or level pegging with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if they got a win here. By the way, just before we get anything into this game itself, I mean the Falcons won this 36-30. What a great game. Phenomenal game. Great divisional rivalry. Both obviously teams competing in the division. It seems to be a very competitive division this year, even with the Panthers picking it up slightly. Obviously, depending how the Saints do this weekend, they could be at 3-2 as well. Just a great Thursday Night Football game after last week's one wasn't so good between the Cowboys and the Giants. So props to Thursday Night Football this week. It was really good. And it was an absolute bonanza of fantasy points. I think there was 20 points basically. Over 20 points by each team, near enough on average in the first half. Both teams obviously getting to 30 or more. This game went to overtime as well. Baker was baking. We got the classic, you like that, Kirk from Kirk Cousins. He very much did like that walk-off touchdown by Kadrell Hodge. At the end, 509 yards for Kirk Cousins today. He went bananas. 58 pass attempts as well. 4 touchdowns. Phenomenal day. I mean, I don't think... Well, probably no one was really streaming Kirk Cousins. And he had a great day. If you did, congrats. You were handsomely rewarded. It was, basically fantasy points all around. In fact, the only real players to get left out of the fantasy game were the running backs. None of the running backs had a particularly specially good day. Rashad White had run really long run, which really helps his box score out. And you wonder if Bucky Irving was in on that run, but he probably would have hosed it. But he only had 44 yards on the day as well. Rashad White 72, so they were okay. That's rushing, by the way. For the Falcons, Bijan Robinson got 61 empty rushing yards. Algier didn't do too much on the ground either. It was all about the receivers in this one. Chris Godwin 5 for 64, okay in PPR, but Mike Evans 5 for 62 and 2 touchdowns. Sterling Shepard even caught a touchdown there. But for the Falcons, Drake London, he had a blow-up game, so you were rewarded if you've been sticking with him. 12 catches, 154 yards and a touchdown. He was in and out of this one with injury as well. Darnell Mooney, he had a blow-up day. You know what, Darnell Mooney, you have one of these. You had a day, Darnell Mooney.
Have a day.
I wanted... Darnell Mooney on my team. In my league of record, I couldn't quite have the bench space to keep him on, but he's been basically 1A and 1B with Drake London here. 9 catches, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He had a really good day. I mean, you're going to when your quarterback throws 58 passes and has over 500 yards. It even made Kyle Pitts relevant. He had 7 catches for 88. Obviously, Kadrell Hodge had that. No one's playing Kadrell Hodge, but he had 2 catches for 67 and a touch. Even Romeo McLeod had 6 for 66. Look, going forward, do not expect this from the Falcons offense again. This was just, these games pop up every now and then. Kirk Cousins still working his way back. I think that's even more impressive that he did this because he is still trying to obviously improve and regain the mobility and the confidence in that Achilles. It's positive though because this Falcons offense hasn't really been great so far. Maybe it's a short week catching a tired Buccaneers defense that still isn't quite fully healthy. I think it was KJ Britt, their linebacker, was getting absolutely abused in coverage in this one. The Bucs offense, though, passing-wise, still great. They're not too good running at the ball still, as was evidenced by neither running backs doing too much in this one. The kickers did well as well, so if you've got them, happy days. Really good Thursday night football game. Going forward, fantasy-wise, I don't think this really changes too much. It gives us a bit more confidence in London. I think Mooney is sort of that wide receiver 3 flex territory now. Maybe Kyle Pitts can be rejuvenated and be a low-end tight end. If you've stuck by him, he did look a bit better in this one. The running backs, it's a bit worrying if you're a Bijan owner, but stick with him. And LG is obviously not too fantasy relevant. Again, if you're the Bucks, not much has changed with that backfield as well. They're both sort of capped where they're both competing for the touches in that backfield there too. And obviously, if you've got Godwin and Evans, you're set. Baker as well. Baker had a great day, 19 of 24, 180 and 3 touchdowns. So congrats if you streamed him as well. He's again firmly a good, strong streaming quarterback every single week, obviously depending on the matchup. So that is the Thursday Night Football recap. We will now, we'll go with a little bit of league news here. Why not? Let's go into it. So we don't usually do the news section because we sort of cover the news off as we go game by game, but we have some bye weeks this week, of which the Chargers, Eagles, Detroit, and Tennessee are all on bye. So some news about some players for those teams, just so we cover off. Levis is expected to remain the start after the bye. He injured his shoulder. It was a separated AC joint, I think more of a mild one, in his throwing arm, I believe, in the game in week 4 against Miami. Mason Rudolph came in and played fairly competently, and the Titans obviously picked up their first win of the season, but Levis is expected to be healthy enough to play when they return from bye. Not too fantasy relevant, but maybe more for the other pieces in the offense there. And then AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, obviously they both missed the most recent game. Brown's been obviously out for a few now with his hamstring, and Devontae Smith missed the game against the Bucks with a concussion, but I would imagine they're both going to be back after their bye. Devontae Smith should be already by then. You would hope AJ Brown's hamstring is all good to go by then as well. So we will go on to our first preview then. So we're going to start off with 1-3 Miami Dolphins at the 1-3 New England Patriots. Just some news bites for this game. Gerard Mayo came out in a press conference this week and expressed his displeasure with Ramondre Stevenson's fumbling. He has fumbled in each game so far, which is not great if you're an NFL running back, and obviously that would not have slid in the Belichick Patriots day. His ass would have been firmly on the bench, but they're trying to lean on him. They're obviously trying opposing defenses are targeting him, but he's got to have better ball security even despite that. I don't think this is a great threat really to Ramondre at the moment. Obviously if it keeps happening it's different, but I think Gerard Mayo kind of said this maybe more to light a fire under him as opposed to genuinely wanting to get Gibson a bit more involved. Gibson hasn't been too bad in an accompanying role to Ramondre, but I think Ramondre is still the starter here. Some worries for the Patriots. David Andrews is out for the season. He injured his shoulder and needs surgery, so the O-line already was not great. He's one of the stalwarts of the Patriots, probably one of the remaining players actually, if not the remaining player from the Super Bowl wins, the starting center. So he's actually quite a big loss, I think, for that team. Snoop Huntley is in line to start again for Miami. He did not look particularly good against the Titans, but they're giving him another week. Raheem Mostert could return. He's been limited again this week with a chest injury. Hasn't played since week 1. Odell is practicing as well. Odell Beckham, if you forgot that he was on the Dolphins, he's practicing, could potentially return for this one, but he is off the fantasy radar. But it is good to get this game out of the way first, because if you thought Titans-Dolphins was bad last week, then boy, this game is going to be... You know what? This game could either be just paint watching dry, boring, terrible football, or it could be one of those weird games where both these teams aren't great, and they can both actually sort of do some stuff against each other, because the Dolphins D hasn't been good, their offense has been bad, the Patriots defense isn't actually that bad, but obviously the offense is pretty poor, so yeah, it could be an odd one. Fantasy wise for the Patriots, Ramondre is the only fantasy relevant player in this game. Possibly Antonio Gibson if you're in a deeper league, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Again, there's some randos like Demario Douglas and Hunter Henry, obviously, who could pop up, but again, I wouldn't be confident in any of those. Ramondre is the only relevant one, and even then, I don't particularly love it, even though on paper it's a pretty good matchup against a weak Dolphins defense with the state of the Patriots O-line, and as I say, losing David Andrews. It doesn't profile as a good one. Ramondre was nearly my king and my peasant of the week. A very bizarre one, but I would just stay. You can use him as a volume-based flex option. Just do not get your hopes up of a big game. But this is the kind of game that is good for Ramondre. The games that the Patriots in theory can compete in and can run the ball a lot in. So like we saw in weeks 1 and weeks 2. So yeah. roll him out there as a volume-based flex play. I just don't be surprised if he's not that good on the day. That's pretty much it for the Patriots. Don't play the kicker Joey Sly. You can play the defense though, actually. I think that, yeah, absolutely, this is one game where you can use the defense. For the Dolphins, again, it's pretty much Devon Achane or bust. Fantasy-wise, and actually I go as far as saying as Devon Achane is my king of the week. I wasn't particularly in love with this one. It was sort of hard picking kings for the running backs this week because I think all the highly ranked ones, or the quote-unquote ones you would expect to be good, are obviously out of the run for what we do with kings and peasants, and there wasn't really a lot outside of that I liked. But I think Devon Achane just about falls within the mirror test to choose for a king of the week, because he has not been good since Tua went down after that week 2 game against the Bills, where he was really good, and he was good in week 1 as well. I think this is the kind of game where they might try and stick with the run more. I think the Patriots' run defense can be got out a bit more, like we saw with Jordan Mason last week. They're gonna, if the Dolphins want a chance to win this game, they're gonna need to do it on the legs of Devon Achane. So I think based on that alone, he's a worthy king of the week. I think actually maybe even getting Mostert back might help him. I think an element of Devon Achane, they've obviously been trying to ride him. They've obviously got Jeff Wilson and Jalen Wright, but they're not very good complementary options. I think he's a better player when he's not necessarily used as the workhorse, when they can use him in certain situations and things like that. So if Mostert's back, I think that's only a benefit. Do not play Mostert either, by the way. In his first game back, we need to see how this backfield shakes out. I would bench both receivers. Yes, Jalen Wardle and Tyreek Hill, because I'm going with Tyreek Hill as my peasant this week. This could typically be the game that he might do well. He was definitely open a few times against the Titans last week. It's just that Snoop Hundley can not get him an accurate ball. Maybe another week in the system. Maybe he's looking for that a bit more. I don't know, but it's a fairly tough secondary if Christian Gonzalez is going to be on Tyreek Hill. He's the Patriots' best corner. He's a pretty good corner. It could shut him down to a degree. I just don't trust that Tyler Huntley is going to be able to do much. So if with Tyreek Hill, he could always have one catch to make his day, as we know. If you've not got any better options, obviously you can, but if you've got someone better like a George Pickens or something like that, I'd probably roll him out over instead of him. No other fantasy relevant Dolphins. I wouldn't play Jason Sanders either. You can play the Dolphins defense. They're a meh stream, I think, even against this pretty bad Patriots offense. You can use them. Just again, don't expect necessarily a massively good game. Okay, we'll go on to the London game next, featuring the 2-2 New York Jets at, technically, the 4-0 Minnesota Vikings. It is a Vikings home game, but obviously very much not a home game. Injury-wise for this one, Rodgers is a little banged up with his knee. He was limited on Wednesday. He was upgraded, I believe, to full yesterday, so he will be out there, but something to just bear in mind. Garrett Wilson expressed some of his frustration with the offense after their poor output against the Broncos last week. Obviously, Hill had a pretty weak day as well. So again, there might be some frustrations growing in New York, some friction there. TJ Hawkinson can return soon. In fact, I think before I came on, I saw they've just designated him to return. Not sure if he'll be back necessarily this week, but he should be back sooner or later, so scoop him up. He's worth an ad, I think, with how well Darnold has been playing and how weak the tight end landscape is at the moment. The big thing from this game is obviously it is the Sam Darnold revenge game. Again, he played them when he was at the Panthers and beat them before, he's now firmly entrenched as a starter, and boy, he's been good to start the year. This Vikings team has just been really, really good. Genuine Super Bowl contenders, I think, at this point. I'm sure he would still like to beat the Jets as well. I'm sure Rodgers would like to beat the Vikings too. Obviously, from his Packers days, he used to drum up on the Vikings, so I'm sure he'd still like to do it, even though he's in another division now. He might be up against it though, because this Vikings defense has been phenomenal so far. Brian Flores is doing a good job with the defense. They really shut down the Packers in the first half last week. They did let them get back into the game, but they were already playing with a huge lead and things at that point. So, especially after what we saw from this Jets offense last week as well, the Vikings Vikings could make it a very difficult day. It is a London game. We need to point that out. That can be like Thursday night games. London games can cause a bit of weirdness to creep in, but you would still probably expect the Vikings to take care of business here. I'm not running away from Darnold if you've got him as a quarterback or you want to use him as a streamer. I think he can still have a reasonable day against this Jets team. Just don't expect a boom performance. If you've got Aaron Jones, you can use him, not Ty Chandler. Obviously, you're starting Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison, don't hate it as a flex. Might benefit because Sauce is obviously going to be on Justin Jefferson. Addison could be the beneficiary there, so I don't mind that as a flex play. No tight end relevance. I think you can play Will Rijkaard. I think it shakes up as a good game for him. And if you've got the Vikings defense, they're pretty much as set and forget as it gets, except the bye week that they've got after this one. So yeah, just use them. On the Jets side of the ball, Aaron Rodgers, do not play him in this one. This doesn't profile as a good game. If you've got Brees, just stick with him. Yes, it was a terrible game against a tough defense last week. He's not going to be that bad. He's going to give you at least a floor game, I think, in this one, so stick with him. Wouldn't necessarily flex Braylon Allen. Again, it doesn't feel like necessarily the game for both these backs to have value. I don't love the receivers in this one either with how good the Vikings have been. If you've got Garrett Wilson, I think you're probably using him as a relatively weak flex wide receiver 3. Again, it's a case of I think if you've got better options, you might want to explore them, but you can play them if you need to. Wouldn't look at any of the other receivers here. Don't particularly love Tyler Conklin at tight end either. Wouldn't use Greg Zuerlein in this one, I don't think, either. In the Jets D, even though they're a pretty good unit on paper, I would not play the Jets D this week if you can avoid it. With how good the Vikings have been, the Packers did get some points, mainly generated in the second half last week, but I think the added motivation Darnold might have to be the Jets, so I would just avoid the Jets D instead of using them. Okay, so now we go back over to America for the Baltimore Ravens at the Cincinnati Bengals. 2-2 Ravens against the 1-3 Bengals. This is a juicy game for this AFC North bout. The Steelers fresh off their first loss, they're at 3-1, so obviously both these two, the Ravens and Cincinnati, coming off their first win. Ravens 2 in a row now. Ravens could tie up the Steelers win-wise, at least going into Monday Night Football, where the Steelers play the Cowboys. After their slow start, the Bengals obviously trying to keep up. They don't want to fall back to 1-4 with 2 games back at least in the division. Up until last week, I would have said that this game was almost guaranteed to be a high-scoring affair because both defenses haven't played particularly well so far, and the offenses have been picking it up of late. But with the Ravens shutting down the Bills last week, maybe this expectedly good Ravens defense is arrived at last, and they could make life difficult for the Bengals. It should still be a very competitive game though. The Bengals D, they can't stop anyone, so you shouldn't have any worries about the Ravens scoring points. But yeah, it might be a different story for the Bengals. It depends. They've obviously been much improved. They did struggle a bit to start the season, but they have got it going more lately. So it just depends what Ravens D shows up really. Starting on the Ravens side, play Lamar. He's probably the best quarterback on the week because the Bengals bleed points again. Derrick Henry just smash him out there too. Justice Hill, don't mind him as a flex play this week. I don't think if you're in a jam for a running back or you need a flex. He's been involved to a degree, and him and Henry have both provided some fantasy value. Obviously, Henry a lot. I would get away from Zay Flowers. I think they're really going to attack the ground in this one. And again, I wouldn't consider really any of the tight ends either until we see something from them again, because Mark Andrews has just been a disaster. Likely he's obviously not popped up really since week 1. Play Justin Tucker if you've got him. Obviously, Ravens D, if you've got them, and there's not anything out there and you don't want to ditch them, I don't know if they're necessarily one of these defenses that are worth hanging on to, but they could have a good day here against the Bengals, but I'm not overly in love with them as an option. For the Bengals, play Joe Burrow. You're playing him if you have him, so just hope he does enough against this Ravens defense. I would try to avoid Zach Moss and probably Chase Brown. In fact, Zach Moss is going to be my peasant of the week at running back. He was outshone thoroughly by Chase Brown last week, even though he did get a touchdown himself. And I don't think this represents necessarily a good matchup for the running backs. I expect the Bengals probably to be playing from behind as well. So, I'd avoid Zach Moss if you can. Receiver-wise, obviously play Jamar. I think you can use T. Higgins in this one. Wouldn't use any of the other receivers like Vass, even though he's been decent. Gesicki, if you're absolutely desperate at tight end, you could roll him out there, but again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. And I would not use McPherson this week. He's going to be my peasant kicker of the week as well. Like I said, the game script, I think he could end up falling out of being useful for the Bengals here. So I'd avoid him if you can, and do not play under any circumstances this terrible Bengals defense. Next game, we have another divisional bout. The 2-2 Indianapolis Colts go to the 0-4 Jacksonville Jaguars, the only 0-4 team left in the NFL. Let's start off with the injury news. Anthony Richardson, he was limited Wednesday with his oblique. I didn't catch his designation yesterday, but I do know that he practiced again, so he's looking good to play this week, which can't be said for Jonathan Taylor. He did not practice the last 2 days with his high ankle sprain. He's going to sit this week, mark my words. Possibly more. High ankle sprains are tricky for running backs and receivers. Evan Ingram could return from his hamstring injury in this one, so something to monitor on that front. Yeah, so let's get into the game analysis. Obviously only took 4 weeks, or it took 4 weeks for Anthony Richardson to get injured. He lasted longer this time around, but at least it was a fairly mild injury. All things considered, obviously Joe Flacco predictably came in and did a pretty good job. He gave these pass catches value. This has been the same model as last year when Minshew came in for the Colts. The more traditional passing quarterback gives the receivers a bit more value, a lot more value in fact than Richardson does. The Colts have been a lot better the last 2 times out as well. The defense has improved. Yeah, they've been playing better as a team. Meanwhile, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, obviously through the first 3 weeks, they were pretty poor. But they did actually show up to play the Texans last week. And if it weren't for a game-winning drive by CJ Stroud, they may well have got their first win of the season. But they did not. They sit at 1-4. But yeah, where do you go? They had the better week. Did they carry that forward? Did they build on that? Or sitting at 1-4 being a bit of a disaster, let's be honest. Does it start to unravel? Do the wheels start to come off a bit more? They could really do with obviously getting their first win here. They're obviously at home against this Colts team. So yeah, this is going to be a very interesting game all around, I think. We'll start off with the Colts side of things. If Anthony Richardson plays, definitely play him because this Jags D sucks. Even if Joe Flacco plays, he's a decent streamer, I think, actually, that you could obviously look to, especially with Jonathan Taylor, I'm not playing in this one. Trey Sermon. What do we do with Trey Sermon? Trey Sermon, he has flattered to deceive a lot so far in his career. He's not really a great running back. He has had opportunity at times, mainly via injury, like the situation he finds himself in now, and hasn't really necessarily done a lot with it. If you need a flex, or you are desperate at running back, assuming Jonathan Taylor sits, like I say, he probably will, I think it's an okay option. Do not get your hopes up that he's going to do anything brilliantly well. You are hoping for him to probably fall in the end zone and get some yards to go with it. If he doesn't get in the end zone, he's probably not going to do a great deal. That is, my takeaway on Trey Sermon. That endorsement was nearly enough to make him King of the Week, but if I didn't go with HM, because that is how dire the running backs are this week outside of sort of the top ranked guys. But I don't particularly love him as an option, but if he's in that starting role, he's absolutely viable to use. Receivers, I wouldn't play any of them if Richardson starts necessarily. You could maybe take a dice roll on Josh Downs or Alec Pierce, but I wouldn't get my hopes up too much. If Flacco plays, however, I think Josh Downs is certainly usable, as is Michael Pittman. Can get behind both of those. Don't use any of the tight ends. I think you can use Matt Gay. He's a reasonable option as the kicker, depending if the quarterback starts. The Colts D as well, they're an okay option. I'd be a bit concerned. They're still not quite healthy on the D-line. Their good cornerback, Kenny Moore, might miss this one as well. So I'm not in love with it, especially with where the Jags looked a bit resurgent. If there's not a better option out there, though, you can take them in the next 2 weeks. They've got some really nice matchups too. I think they play Tennessee and Miami, so you're set for 3 weeks if you do roll with them this week, but just understand they might not have the best day. They could have a good day, though, because this Jags team obviously hasn't been great. On the other side of the ball, Trevor Lawrence... He had a better day against the Texans last week. He went into Houston and had a decent day. I don't hate it as a streamer this week. If you need a quarterback, if Kenny Moore sits especially, and the D-line remains banged up for the Colts, he could get a bit more joy in this one. But yeah, he's not the safest streamer out there, so if there are other streamers, I'd go with them. But you can use Trevor Lawrence this week. Fire up ETN, yep, just fire him up. Don't fire up Tank Bigsby. Last week, a lot of his yards came on one run. Etienne left the game briefly as well, so I would just stick to Etienne with the running backs. For the receivers, it's all about Brian Thomas and Christian Kirk. I think you can fire up Brian Thomas regardless of the health of the defense. Christian Kirk, if Kenny Moore sits, he's definitely playable. Do not play him if Kenny Moore plays. Evan Ingram, if he returns, he might be worth a dice roll just with where the tight end landscape is and if you need a tight end. But obviously, if he doesn't play, nobody else is usable here. Do not use the Jags kicker, Cam Little, or their defense either. Okay, next game, we're going on to the 1-3 Cleveland Browns going to the 3-1 Washington Commanders. Some just news and notes here. Eckler should return in this one from his concussion. It was limited Wednesday for practice yesterday on Thursday. Brian Robertson has been a DMP Wednesday and Thursday with a knee injury, so definitely check his status. He will need to have at least a limited session today, I think, for a chance to play on Sunday. David Njoku returned to practice Wednesday, was a DMP Thursday, though allegedly that was planned, but it's always sort of odd when that happens, but we'll see. His stats today will be very key. The Browns have also opened the practice window for Nick Chubb. He was out there practicing, I think, on a limited basis so far this week. He's not going to play in this one, but it's good to see him work his way back from his obviously gruesome knee injury from last season. But yeah, I mean, so far the Commanders have been just the surprise of the season, really. I don't think anybody expected them to be this good. Certainly not to be obviously leading the NFC East. Jaden Daniels has been great. He has been amazing. The defense even showed up last week against the Cardinals. It's really been a Cinderella story, which is extremely ironic because they're playing a Browns team which had a similar Cinderella story back with Baker a few years ago when everyone sort of, they started having some success. Everyone sort of liked to see it because they've been a very beleaguered franchise, and how quickly that can change, as we know, with the things that have transpired for them since. So yes, it's firmly the Commanders wearing the tiara at the moment. But yeah, the most surprising thing about this Commanders team is that their defense was actually good last week. And the Browns remain a joke, as we know. So yeah, let's hope the Commanders keep it going. Fantasy-wise on this one, we'll start off with Washington. Play Jaden Daniels if you got him. Don't even question it at this point. Just roll him out there. If Brian Robertson plays, he's definitely usable. I think probably as an RB2 at least in this one. But obviously the knee injury may limit him a bit, and the defense is a bit of a tougher matchup, certainly. So just caution it there. If he does sit, definitely use Austin Eckler in his return. He's probably not going to carry the load. Jeremy McNichols obviously had a great game filling in for him last week as well. But yeah, I think that would thrust Austin Eckler into at least a flex-worthy play. Receiver-wise, don't mind if you want to play Terry McLaurin here. Again, he's not the strongest receiver. He's sort of on the borderline of being a wide receiver 2, but he's a good flex wide receiver 3, I think, this week. Beyond that, though, I wouldn't use anyone else on this Commanders offense. Again, I think you could probably use Austin Seibert. Check the weather, but I think you can use the kicker. The Commanders defense, I think they're in play as well. I am going to caution that with if the Browns have their O-lineman play in this one, because they have a lot of injured O-linemen at the moment. If the O-linemen play, I would not recommend the Commanders as a play this week. I know they had a good week last week, but this is talent-wise not a great unit, even though Dan Quinn, a defensive head coach there, is running the helm. I would rather go somewhere else. However, if the Browns are down multiple O-linemen, I do like this as an option because Deshaun Watson has been getting sacked. They've not been great running the ball. This offense has been pretty putrid so far, to be quite honest. So, if they are down those O-linemen, absolutely fire up the Commanders as an option here. Looking at the Browns, is Deshaun Watson in the streaming category this week? That is the question. I would prefer not to be quite honest. But if he's got his O-lineman back, similar to what I just said about the defense, I think you can use him. This does profile as a better matchup for him. But only if those O-linemen are healthy. And again, he's not my favourite streamer on the week, so go somewhere else if they're better available. I don't know what we do with Jerome Ford, Devontae Foreman at this point. I guess Jerome Ford is a flex if you've got him, but I'm not massively in love with it. But they might try and keep the ball a bit more on the ground in this one. He's the only running back worth using, really. Receiver-wise, again, if you've got Amari Cooper, you probably have to roll him out there, certainly with the bye weeks and things. Just don't necessarily expect a great day. Jerry Jeudy maybe has some very weak appeal if you're in a deep league or really in a bind as a flex. David Njoku, if he does return, he's definitely usable as a tight end. Obviously check his injury status. I would not use their kicker, who I believe is Cade York nowadays. Yes, I think that is right, Cade York. And I wouldn't use the Browns defense here either, obviously. Dustin Hopkins, sorry, not Cade York. Dustin Hopkins, do not use him, and do not use the Browns defense either, because Washington have obviously been very good. On to our next one then. This is a good game. 3-1 Buffalo Bills at the 3-1 Houston Texans. So yeah, this is a preview of a potential playoff matchup for sure. News updates: so Tank Dell is back at practice, so he should return this weekend after missing last week's game. Joe Mixon, he was obviously pushing to play last week. He came in with a limited on Friday, I think it was, did not play in the end. So it's a bit surprising you start off this week as not practicing on Wednesday and Thursday. Again, if he gets a limited session again today, that does give him a chance to play in this one. If he doesn't, obviously it looks like he'll be sitting another week. Khalil Shakir has been did not practice the last couple of days either, so again he'll probably need to get in at least a limited today for a chance to suit up. But the big thing in this game is, of course, it's the Stephon Diggs revenge game. It's after he got dumped by Buffalo, got traded to Houston. They obviously had a bit of a messy divorce. Nobody wants to talk about it sounds like. Obviously, Josh Allen had that slip. Well, maybe not a slip, but in a press conference, he obviously said it's nice how people weren't obsessed with stats and stuff like that. People took that as a directed comment towards Stephon Diggs, whether it wasn't. We obviously don't know. Stephon Diggs, he's already had one revenge game against the Vikes, where he did pretty well this season, and I think he's going to be extra motivated against the Bills in this one. The Texans nearly had a bit of a calamity last week against the winless Jags, but they clutched up and got the W, having a game-winning drive. The Jags did look better, so I think it was more about that as opposed to the Texans not being good. After getting absolutely beat down the week before by the Vikings, it would have been pretty ugly if they'd lost to the Jags there as well. The Bills are coming off their first loss of the season. They got absolutely drubbed by the Ravens last week, so it's going to be interesting to see what Bills team we get here. It's going to be an interesting test as well. I think the Bills did look really good to start the season, but I do worry their opening opposition in Arizona, Miami, and the Jags, certainly the teams that they faced, were not good. I'm wondering, is our view of the Bills made a lot better by the opposition and our views? Because at the time we thought, those teams, they should be pretty good. As it transpires, we know those teams aren't really that great. The Bills did look really good, and they were good, but were they made to look quite a bit better because of the opposition? So, and how good are the Texans? We don't know. Obviously, they won. They've got 3 wins. I don't think they've necessarily been overly convincing in all of their wins, though. They got by divisional opponent Colts week 1. They got by the Bears in week 2. They obviously got by the Jags in week 3. Like, there's something to be said for teams that just win games, which they have done, but they've not been beating down games, and they obviously got pumped by the Vikings, like I said. So this game is really interesting on all that fronts because, we might have a better idea of where these teams are at when they play each other. I think in that vein as well, the Bills team may be a little overrated with the opposition that they've played, because going into the season with the loss of Tre'Davious White, Matt Milano being injured, the view was kind of that, okay, this defense isn't going to be as good as it was, and they've obviously played pretty well, but I think it's because the opposition has been great. So I'm not too concerned necessarily for the Houston offense here, or by the Bills defense. If you've got CJ Stroud, just play him. Look, it might not be a blow-up week, but this could be a shootout. It's a big game that they're going to be up for, so he could have a very good day. If Joe Mixon is out there, just play him. Do not even think about it. If Joe Mixon plays, you play him. If he doesn't play, I wouldn't really bother with anyone. I'm not even sure I don't think Damian Pierce is going to be back for this one. Cam Akers is just a guy. I think he's proved that once again. Darren Gumbawale got the winning touchdown last week as well. If you're in a very deep league, he could be an option, but I'd avoid the backfield if Mixon doesn't play. If you've got Nico, just play him. Nico's been great. Absolutely play Stephon Diggs this week if you've got him. I nearly picked him for my King of the Week. And Tank Dell, I wouldn't personally play Tank Dell in this one. For what it's worth, the Bills defense has been good against the deep ball. They give more up underneath. Obviously, Tank Dell is more of the big play receiver. He's the kind of guy that can obviously, just have a good game out of nowhere. It hasn't happened so far. Coming back from injury, I would go somewhere else if you have another option other than Tank Dell this week. If you're desperate, you can roll him out there as a flex or a wide receiver 3, but I wouldn't love it. Dalton Schultz again, if this game has a bit of shootout potential, so he's possibly usable in this one, but again, not one of my favourite options. If you've got Fairbairn, use him. Do not play the Texans D. For the Buffalo Bills, obviously play Josh Allen. James Cook, if you've got him, play him. If Shakir plays, play him. But if he doesn't, I probably wouldn't look to any of the other pass catchers. Obviously, if you've got Kincaid at tight end, you're probably playing him, but he is unfortunately my peasant tight end of the week. It was pretty tough again, like the running backs, to choose a king. Pretty tough to pick a running back tight end peasant, this week, because there aren't a lot of good tight ends at the moment, so it's like, how do you pick a good one that you think is going to do bad? But he's probably the best to carry. He's going to do okay. He might catch a touchdown if you're lucky, but yeah, we're not too on board with it. Tyler Bass, you can use him, and the Bills D, do not play them in this one, I don't think, against this good Houston offense. Okay, now we've got the 1-3 Carolina Panthers at the 2-2 Chicago Bears. Jonathan Brooks isn't returning just yet. Chubb's obviously coming back from off of his window's been activated, but Jonathan Brooks has not been activated or started his window yet, but it's coming, so hold on if you've got him. We've got a double revenge game in this one. Andy Dalton on the Bears and DJ Moore on the Panthers, but this is quite an interesting game, I think, because these Bears, even though they've picked up a couple of wins now, it's not still quite running smoothly on offense. It is improving, but it's not quite there. And the Panthers have obviously shown the last couple of weeks that they can actually play. Obviously, Andy Dalton's been giving them a bit of a shot in the arm. It's probably not going to be the best game for fantasy, I'll be honest, but there is an interesting game in here somewhere. For the Panthers, wouldn't use Dalton as a streamer in this one. This Bears defense has been pretty good. If you've got Chuba, you can use him. That's fine. Deontay Johnson, not massively in love with him this week, but you can probably roll him out there, but just as a wide receiver 3 flex, like I say, if there are better options, use them. That's pretty much it fantasy wise for those guys. For the Bears, Caleb, do not play him. You could, if you really need a streamer, and there is not a lot out there, you can use Caleb Williams in this one. He could get a bit more joy. Maybe they use this game to try and get him going a little bit more. So yeah, you could use Caleb Williams as a streamer in this one, but he's down the list. I don't know what to make of this backfield. They obviously had a much better day last week after this backfield has been terrible so far. There's talks of Roschon getting involved, Khalil Herbert being the goal line running back and all this nonsense. But the matchup's too good. It was better last week. The game script could be on the Bears side. You can play DeAndre Swift. I think is a weak RB2 probably in this one. If you've got him, do not consider Roschon Johnson and Herbert though. I don't care what they're talking up. It still seems to be DeAndre Swift. Then maybe they settled that to light a fire under him, and if they did, it did work last week, to be fair. So yeah, he's the only running back I'd really be interested in for the Bears here. For the receivers, if you've got DJ Moore, I think you've got to go with him as a wide receiver 2, a decent wide receiver 3. He's up against JC Horn, which isn't necessarily the best matchup, but obviously they've got Keenan Allen and Dunzo, so they can't commit all their attention to him. This is a revenge game, so there might be an element there. They might try and work a touchdown to him. He's been pretty good as a floor option. He's not had a blow-up game yet, but maybe it comes if Caleb takes a little bit of a step forward here. Cole Kmet, again, he's an okay tight end option. Not too excited by him, but you can use him if he's out there. Courage Santos, he was my Ken kicker of the week, the week before, yeah. But he's an okay option here. I think there's probably better available though. And the Bears D though, if you got the Bears D, you can use them. That's fine. Okay, let's go on to our next one then. So the 2-2 Las Vegas Raiders taking on the 2-2 Denver Broncos. So the big news around these two teams is obviously Devontae Adams has now officially requested a trade. And yeah, he may have a case of the old contract hamstring. He obviously had a hamstring injury that caused him to miss last week's game. And yeah, I don't know, maybe that hamstring gets a lot better once he puts a new jersey on. Sometimes those magical jerseys can do that. But no, joking aside, I think he does probably actually have a hamstring injury. But whether he does or doesn't, he probably has played his last down as a Raider. He is obviously looking to try and explore a trade. For the Raiders, Max Crosby was a DMP on Wednesday. I didn't see what his status was, but he did miss last week's game as well. So wanted to keep an eye on there. But yeah, this is a weird game. We've got one of the most dysfunctional teams in the Raiders at the moment. And on the other side, a team that might actually be on the up and up that weren't great for the first couple of weeks, but maybe getting it a bit together. The Raiders somehow won last week. Or they were playing the Browns, I suppose, so that makes sense. But the Broncos are actually on a 2-game winning streak. They went to Tampa and obviously beat them. And they knocked off the Jets in New York last week, somewhat surprisingly as well. Offensively, they were still putrid. There was a point, I think, at halftime where Bo Nix was like 7-15 for negative pass yards or something outrageously silly like that. This defense is absolutely legit. This game is going to repel fantasy points, however. I can't tell if Antonio Pierce is going to bring this team together in the wake of this Devontae Adams stuff, or if it's going to unravel. I'm not sure what I think of him as a coach, to be quite honest. I think he came in and did well as an interim last year, but I don't know. I don't know about him as a head coach. I think the Broncos are going to win this game, and it could really start to fall apart potentially for the Raiders. On the Broncos side of the ball, you could maybe use Cortland Sutton as a flex or a wide receiver 3. Javonte Williams is a weak flex as well. I think that's about it. I wouldn't use all lots. You absolutely can use their defense though, and yeah, the Denver Broncos are my king defense of the week, because this Raiders offense, while they weirdly had some joy against the Browns last week, I can't see that happening going into Mile High. They do not obviously play Gardner Minshew. Yeah, he could really get his butt handed to him here in this one. Don't use Alexander Mattison as well. This does not shape up as a good matchup for him, albeit it sounds like they're edging towards him as the starting running back, but this is not the right matchup for him to run him out there. Jacoby Myers is a receiver 1 here. I don't know if they're going to devote all their attention to him with Patrick Surtain. I don't think it really matters, to be honest. So they're going to don't play a receiver for the Raiders here. You can use Brock Bowers with the state of the Titan landscape. Just roll him out there if you've got him. Don't expect a massively good week necessarily though, and don't play the Raiders kicker Daniel Carlson, and some people have been pushing the Raiders D as an option this week. If Crosby plays, they're a weak streaming option if there's nothing better available. If Crosby does not play, do not use them. I know the Broncos D hasn't been great, but they're at home. They should be able to play with a lead. This is what we saw against the Bucs. If the Broncos can play with a lead, they're just going to shut down the game and salt it away. So I would personally advise avoiding the Raiders defense. Okay, next game then, we've got the 1-3 Arizona Cardinals going to the 2-2 San Francisco 49ers. McBride is trending towards playing in a return from his concussion injury. Matt Prater did not practice on Wednesday with a knee injury. Obviously, knees, feet, legs, pretty important for kickers, so didn't catch his stats yesterday, but definitely one to keep an eye on. The latest update with Christian McCaffrey, he's dealing with an Achilles tendonitis in both legs, which does not sound like fun. So I don't think anything's really changed since the last time around, though, that they're going to obviously try and start to work him back. Maybe he comes back in November, but we'll see. It's anyone's guess at this point. The Niners got their tune-up game against the Patriots last week, and that got them ready to slap the Cardinals around a bit. A team they historically dominate. They did slip up against the Rams, obviously, when they played them earlier, but surely they're not going to slip up against the Cardinals here. The Cardinals themselves just got slapped by the Commanders, both offensively and defensively, so I really cannot see any way the Niners do not win this game. We'll start off with the Niners side of the ball. Play Brock Purdy if you've got him. It's pretty much play everyone. Play Jordan Mason, play Debo, play Brandon Ayuk. Even if you got Jawan Jennings, I don't necessarily hate it as a weak flex. I wouldn't necessarily endorse it, but if you're in a jam, I think you can use him. Absolutely play George Kittle if you've got him. Play Jake Moody. Play the Niners defense. Just play everyone for the Niners. And on the other side of the board, Kyler Murray, I'm a bit worried because what we were sold with this Cardinals team coming to the year, was this defense is going to suck, but this offense is pretty good. They're going to be losing a lot. They're going to play from catch-up. They're going to need to score points. We've not really seen that so much. They obviously absolutely drummed up on the Rams, outside of that, the Cardinals have not been that great, and that was kind of capitulated by, having a really bad day against not a good Washington defense last week. For that reason, Kyler Murray is my peasant quarterback of the week. If you don't have another good option in your team, if you can't reasonably get another decent streamer off the waiver, I don't mind you sticking with Kyler, but it's a bit concerning that this Cardinals defense hasn't looked great so far. He's not been so good, so I would advise trying to get a different option other than Kyler if you can. I don't think he's necessarily going to have a good week here. He might have the game script on his side if the Cardinals do get losing down, but they just get slapped by the Niners normally, so I would prefer to use a different option at quarterback. James Conner, again, you're probably playing him if you've got him, but by God, temper expectations. He's only an RB2 this week at best, I think, for me. Marvin Harrison, you should roll him out there if you've got him. I don't know where he's going to end up, how good a week he had, but at worst, he should be no worse than a wide receiver 2, you would hope. Roll him out there. Wouldn't consider another receiver. Obviously, if Trey McBride returns, definitely play Trey McBride. Don't play McBride in this one. It's not the right game, especially if he could get game scripted out, and absolutely do not play the Cardinals defense. Okay, now we've got the 2-2 Green Bay Packers going to the 1-3 Los Angeles Rams. Christian Watson obviously suffered a high ankle sprain in last week's game, so he's going to miss some time. Romeo Doubs as well did not practice on Thursday. It was a personal issue, very unclear what his outlook is. So if you've got him, check it, and you're thinking of playing him, wouldn't advise that necessarily, by the way, but definitely check his status for the game on Sunday, because it's not an injury related thing, so we obviously hope everything is okay with him. Jordan Love's return predictably sparked this Packers offense back to life, but it wasn't quite enough against the formidable Vikings. Obviously they got shut down in the first half, they played catch up in the second half, but it was good to see the Packers offense really spring into life there and put some points on the board. If they carry that through here to this one, they should have absolutely no problem taking care of this inconsistent Rams team. They continue to be obviously quite injury beleaguered. They obviously did surprisingly beat the Niners at home, so maybe going back home. McVay's a good coach as well. He can do some things, but I would ultimately still expect the Packers to win this game. Let's start off with the Packers side of the board. If you got Jordan Love, just play him. He's a good option this week. Josh Jacobs, play him too. Stick with him. I know he's not necessarily been great, but it's coming. Jaden Reed, great option this week. Definitely play him. Dontavian Wicks, play him as well. In fact, he is my king receiver of the week, which I hate to say because my opponent has him in my league record, and I kind of wanted to add him, but I didn't have the bench space. I really like Dontavian Wicks coming into the year based on his talent, but the opportunity just wasn't there because it's obviously quite a crowded receiving core. But it's not at the moment because obviously Christian Watson is gone for this one. Romeo Doubs may not play as well. But even if Doubs does play, I still like Dontavian Wicks as a really strong flex play in this week. Or even possibly Nick into as a wide receiver too. So, play Dontavian Wicks if you've got him this week. Tucker Kraft is an option at tight end. I don't particularly love it, but you can explore him. You can use the Green Bay kicker as well, Braden Narveson. If they're playing with lead and things, I absolutely don't mind that. Packers defense is in play as well. They're not my favourite streamer of the week, but I think they're a reasonably good option. They've actually been a pretty good fantasy defense anyway so far, and if they can exploit the Rams and McVay can't coach around the deficiencies of the Rams offense, then the Packers defense could have a pretty good day here. For the Los Angeles Rams, wouldn't advise playing Matthew Stafford in this one. Obviously, the receivers he's playing with are not conducive to him having fantasy success. Like I said as well, the Packers defense has been reasonably good. Kyren Williams, absolutely fire him up, locked in RB1. He could have a really good day against the Packers defenses. They are a bit more softer to running backs. Do not play any of these receivers. Jordan Whittington is maybe the weakest of flexes, but I wouldn't advise it really. I wouldn't advise Colby Parkinson either. Don't use the Rams kicker, who's Joshua Carty, and do not use the Rams defense either. Now we go to the Northwest, where we see another NFC West team against an NFC East team. The 1-3 New York Giants go to the 3-1 Seattle Seahawks. Injury-wise in this one, so Devin Singletary did not practice the last couple of days with a groin. Check his status. If he gets limited today, he could play, but if he does not, he's probably going to sit this one out. Neighbours did not practice on Wednesday and Thursday with a concussion that he suffered on Thursday Night Football last week. It's a bit of a worry. We're hoping, obviously, with the extra few days that he could maybe return, because typically Sunday to Sunday, a player will typically miss the game if they have a concussion. But obviously, concussions are a weird thing. Each one can be different. Each player can obviously be different. So I would say at this point it's more likely than not he's going to sit out of this one. News-wise, Seattle have signed 42-year-old Jason Peters. That offensive lineman, that tackle, still going. Jason Peters. It's not really relevant, so I just wanted to call it out because it's so funny. But yeah, he's been a really good offensive lineman, Jason Peters. He was great back in his Eagles days, so good for him. So yeah, the Giants go cross country here, and they're going to get pooped on by some Seahawks, really, because only the Lions have stood between the Seahawks and perfection so far. So the Giants, will likely just kind of move out of the way and let them do whatever they want, especially if they're down neighbours and Singletary as well. There's no way the Seahawks do not win this game. So there's nothing really more to say than that, to be honest. Starting on the Seattle side of the board, absolutely play Geno Smith. He's a great streaming option this week. I think he's been playing quite well so far this year. So much so, he is my king quarterback of the week. So roll him out there if you've got him. A guy in my league of record just picked him up to play him over Patrick Mahomes. Love that move. Do that. Kenneth Walker, play him. He obviously had his play-up game. Do not play Zach Charbonnet with Walker back. Play DK Metcalf if you've got him. I like Jackson Smith and Jigba in this one as well. He's a decent flex option. Maybe comes into the bottom end of the wide receiver 2, but prefer him as a wide receiver 3. That's pretty much it offensively for the Seahawks. Play Jason Myers if you've got him. He again is my king kicker of the week. And I could have made the Seahawks D my king defense as well here, but they're going to absolutely trounce the Giants if they're down Malik Neighbors and Singletary as well. So they're a superb option this week. For the Giants, if Neighbors does not play and Singletary does not play, there is not really any fancy value here. If you're a PPR league, you can use Wan'Dale Robinson regardless of Neighbors is there or not. Outside of that, do not use anyone. Do not use Tyron Tracy if Singletary sits. I don't care. Do not play anyone. Do not play Daniel Jones. Don't play the kicker. Don't play the defense. That is all. Right, we'll go on to Sunday Night Football now. The 2-2 Dallas Cowboys go to the 3-1 Pittsburgh Steelers. Brandon Cooks is going to be out for this week and possibly longer. He has had some surgery on his knee. So yeah, he's out for a while. Is Rico Dowdle poised to take over this backfield? There was an article this week speaking about how poor kind of Zeke has been, that Dalvin Cook could possibly get activated and get a look as well, or the Dowdle could possibly get some more work. He has been getting some more work the last few weeks. Obviously Hunter Lipke, the fullback, has been working in his passing downs back as well. Is this still Justin Fields' team? He's almost certainly going to be the starter again this week. It's any guess, obviously, when Russell Wilson is going to come back. At least for this week. I mean, they really should stick with Justin Fields. He has actually played quite well, I think, all things considered. Certainly, and Arthur Smith has done a relatively good job as well, being the offensive coordinator there, I think, as well. They've worked well together. This is a weird but oddly intriguing game in a primetime spot here. The Steelers obviously dropped their first game last week against the Colts, but the offense actually came to life for the first time. They sort of had to, because obviously they fell behind, but it kind of showed us, okay, the Steelers offense can do it. Justin Fields can. Maybe we can take the training wheels off and let him play a bit here. The Cowboys beat the Giants, but they didn't do it in overly convincing fashion. This defense is very undermanned at the moment. They're going to be down. DeMarcus Lawrence in this one, possibly Micah Parsons as well. And they're already underperforming even with those guys. Trevon Diggs was sort of in and out of the game last week as well with an ankle injury. This game really could go in any direction. I can't really call it. It could be a blowout either way. It could be a close game. I'm not really sure. I think the fact that it's in Pittsburgh obviously does benefit the Steelers here a bit. And they've obviously got the better defense, and they should be able to move the ball against this Dallas defense as well. But yeah, let's start with the Dallas side of the board. I don't like Prescott really as a streamer this week. He's probably going to get a volume because I don't think they're really going to be able to run the ball. So he's potentially usable as a weak streamer, but it is a bad matchup, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Wouldn't recommend any running backs in this one either. Rico Dowdle's not really getting enough work. He was somewhat fortuitous to have a decent day last week when he had that receiving touchdown. This doesn't profile as a good matchup, so even if he did get a bit more volume here, I don't particularly love it. And then CeeDee Lamb, you're obviously playing him if you've got him. I wouldn't consider any other receivers. You can play Jake Ferguson, stick with Brandon Aubrey if you got him because he's the GOAT, obviously. They love kicking field goals. Mike McCarthy does anyway. And I would avoid the Cowboys defense here. Even though the Steelers offense is not necessarily the best, just with how undermanned they are. They've not been the same unit they were here last season as they were last season. Mike Zimmer, I don't think has been doing necessarily a great job either. I think he's maybe a little bit long in the tooth for the modern NFL game, so do not use the Cowboys defense. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, you can absolutely stream Justin Fields. I think he's a good streamer this week. He proved last week that he can play the guitar, so against this sort of undermanned Dallas defense, I think you can roll out there again. Roll out Najee Harris. Jalen Warren's probably not going to play in this one with a knee injury, and Cordero Patterson hasn't been pressing either, so Najee Harris is a very good option this week. Play George Pickens. I think he's a reasonably good option this week as well. Don't be too concerned, I think, about the Trevon Diggs and the Dallas secondary. I think George Pickens can have a decent day. Pat Freiermuth's a reasonably good option at tight end as well. He was a potential king of the week, so you can use him if you've got him. You can play Chris Boswell as well if you want, and absolutely play the Steelers D still. They're pretty much matchup proof. They're that good at defense, so yeah, I just stick with them. They can get a bit of joy out of this Dallas offense, I think, here. And then we go to our last game of the week. It's the 2-2 New Orleans Saints taking on the 4-0 Kansas City Chiefs. One of obviously the two undefeated teams left in the league on Monday Night Football. Rashee Rice is definitely out for this one. He's now been placed on IR as well, so we're getting a little bit more clarity slowly with him. It's still unclear exactly what his injury is. Obviously, everyone suspects it's a torn ACL. Supposedly, the swelling is not making that clear. He's walking without crutches, but that doesn't mean anything because we see lots of players be able to walk off the field once they've torn their ACL and stuff like that. So he's going to be out for at least a while, though. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he could return in this one. I think they've activated him now and he's been practicing off of the IR. Taysom Hill, he didn't practice Thursday. He's dealing with fractured ribs, which players can play through. So I just wanted to keep an eye on, and bear in mind this is the Monday Night Football game. Just definitely check his status and have a backup in place. You could probably get one of the Saints ones if you're thinking of using him. So how will the most average fantasy quarterback around in Patrick Mahomes do with a suddenly bare cupboard? The Chiefs, annoyingly, will probably still find a way because that's what they do. They're at home here as well. They can probably take advantage of this Saints team. Could the Saints possibly go into Arrowhead and do it? They've lost a couple on the bounce. They're at a bit of a crossroads themselves after they've started the season so well. They've obviously kind of cooled off significantly the last couple of weeks. So yeah, this is another curious primetime game for us to take a look at here. So on the Kansas City side of the board, if you've got Patrick Mahomes, lots of people are recommending him as a sit. I wouldn't go as far as saying Patrick Mahomes is a sit. You gotta wonder. You have all this talk about quarterbacks sometimes, and then does this? Patrick Mahomes doesn't need a fire lit under him. Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback in the NFL. He doesn't need to. They're winning games. They don't care how they get it done. They could get Kelsey going a bit more. He's got some options there. Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson, Juju Smith-Schuster. The running backs aren't awful. Kareem Hunt came in on a nice day last week. Obviously, Clyde could be coming back. If you've got Mahomes and you don't want to burn another roster spot and there's not a good streamer out there, I don't mind sticking with him. Just don't expect him to, he's not the Patrick Mahomes of old in this offense at the moment where he's slinging it and jumping and running all over the place and throwing these crazy deep balls and stuff. That isn't Patrick Mahomes in this offense anymore. It's probably still in there. It could pop out here and there. Could even pop out in this one. But yeah, if you've got him and you don't want to burn a roster spot, you can play him, but you might want to find a better streamer, like a Geno Smith or something, like I said, or a Justin Fields, if you have the capability to do so. If you've got Kareem Hunt, I think you can use him here, temper expectations if Edwards-Helaire is back, but he looked pretty good measure last week in his first game of the season. Xavier Worthy, he's a flex, I think, wide receiver 3. We sort of need to see how this receiving core shakes out in the wake of losing Rashee Rice. He obviously profiles to gain a little bit more work, but it wouldn't surprise me if Kelsey obviously gets involved a bit more now. Kelsey, I think they're going to have to lean on Kelsey now with Rashee Rice going down. It's the model they had when they traded Tyreek Hill the first time. Could we see, a Justin Watson or Juju Smith-Schuster get a bit more involved? Yes. Are they fantasy relevant at the moment? No. So don't use them. Could play Harrison Butker. I don't mind the Chiefs defense here. I don't mind them as a gamble at home. I think this defense, with the offense kind of suffering injuries and not necessarily playing the best, I think this defense gets up and they try and put the team on their back. So I don't hate them against the Saints here that are a bit injured on the O-line and obviously haven't looked as good themselves the last couple of weeks. So I think you can use them. For the New Orleans Saints, do not play Derek Carr in this one. He's off the streaming map. Play Alvin Kamara if you've got him. You can play Chris Olave. I don't necessarily love it. He's not the best option on the week going against Sean McDuffie, but you can use him. It doesn't feel like a Rashid Shaheed game for me. I would probably try and get away from him if you can. The tight ends, really, it's only Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill, he's going to be my king tight end of the week, I think. I would say it's pretty desperate at tight end at the moment. But obviously he came back and, look, what we said earlier a couple of weeks ago was the usage was looking better for Taysom. He was on the field more. They were using him in more traditional ways, but they weren't using him in those gimmicky ways to get him those touchdowns, which he'd been so good at in previous seasons. We saw that last week. He came back from injury. He got the 2 touchdowns. So if they're going to bring that back into this offense, which with the O-line they might compensate with doing just that, I think he's going to be an option again that does get those gimmicky touches, potentially, as well as this good usage. The injury is a bit of an issue, but if he's good enough to play, I'd say, and you need a tight end, absolutely roll him out there. He's my king tight end of the week. I wouldn't play Blake Grupe, the kicker. The Saints defense as well, it's a weird one. It's a weird one because it's generally good. I'm not going to tell you to play the Saints defense. If this game was in Louisiana, they'd be a better option, but I think going into Arrowhead, it doesn't profile as a try and take advantage of the Chiefs offense in this game. So that is it for all the previews. So I would just summarize my Kings and Peasants team for you. So we've got a quarterback for the Kings, Geno Smith, Devon Achane, Dontavian Wicks at receiver, Taysom Hill, tight end, Jason Myers, and Denver Broncos are all the Kings of the week. And then the Peasants of the week for me are Kyler Murray, Zach Moss, Tyreek Hill, Dalton Kincaid, Evan McPherson, and the Jets defense. So that is it for the previews. We're going to finish up and have a little bit of fun here. So let's have a little game. So, I can't well play 20 questions on my own. If you caught our one and only pod recap show, I played the Immaculate Grid on there with you. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to play the Immaculate Grid, everybody. So if you do not know what the Immaculate Grid is, it's basically a 3x3 grid. I'll hold it up there if you're watching on YouTube, where you have to name a player that fits into the categories shown. So in the top left, you have to name a player that plays for Tampa Bay and the Atlanta Falcons, and then next along is Tampa Bay and the Browns, and so on. So let's go for it. So a player that played for the Falcons and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. By the way, if you want to send in at the end, let us know how you did, or comment if you're watching or whatever. Let us know how you did, see how you match up against my score. But for and you can obviously use my players if you can't think of anyone. But for the Bucks and the Falcons, I'm going with Scotty Miller, the receiver that used to play there. Let me just remember how his name appears in here. Oh god, of course he is way down the list. Bear with me, listeners. Where is Scott Miller? There he is. So he's a good score, 3%. Okay, then we've got the Browns and the Buccaneers. Obviously, Baker Mayfield is the one that immediately springs to mind there. I'm not too confident in anyone else apart from that, so we're going to go Baker Mayfield for that. Then we have Bucks receivers with over 1,000 receiving yards. Obviously, the obvious ones are Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Deshaun Jackson possibly had 1,000 with them, but I'm going to go a little bit further back, and we're going to go with Vincent Jackson. He used to play for the Chargers, went to the Bucks, had a few years, decent years there. Then we've got the Falcons and the Bears. I'm pretty sure Taylor Gabriel played for those two teams. He did. That's another 3% score. Very nice. And then we've got the Bears and the Browns. I'm going to go with Brian Hoyer for that one. Former Patriots backup quarterback who played all over the place. Then we need a Bears 1,000-yard receiver. They have that's not typically something the Bears have. They are allergic to wide receivers getting yards. Historically they have been anyway. Obviously DJ Moore last year did. Brandon Marshall must have done. Did Alshon Jeffrey get a K with them? That's the question. I'm going to gamble that Alshon Jeffrey got 1,000 yards with them. He did. 16% is the score there. Then we've got the Falcons and the Steelers. I think, again, I'm going to use my cop out of a Patriot I can think of. I'm pretty sure Stephen Ridley played for the Steelers and the Falcons. He did 0.4%. There we go. Nailed it. Then we've got the Browns and the Steelers. Again, just off the top of my head, I can think of Joe Hayden on that one. High score there, 70%, not surprising. And then a Steelers receiver that got 1,000 yards. Probably a lot here. Hines Ward, Antonio Holmes, Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders, possibly Antoine Randall, and Swan probably did. George Pickens might have got okay. I'm going to go with Juju Smith-Schuster, I think, though, because he had that one good year. 9%. So my score on the week, 197%. Got all 9, so not bad at all. Let us know how you did. Baker and Joe Hayden, pretty high scores there for me, but it's okay. I got 9. That's all that matters. And that brings us to the end of the show. So, if you've, like I said at the top, if you've got a question on a particular player or game for the recap article or the previous show, please send it in. Or if you have a player you want to submit for 20 questions and a fantasy story about that player as well, let us know at LOCFantasyShow@gmail.com, or you can let us know on social media at the LOC Fantasy page on Facebook, our LOC Fantasy Show subreddit, or LOC_Fantasy_Show if you want to message us directly, at LOC Fantasy Show on X, LOC Fantasy Show on Instagram, and LOC.fantasy.show on TikTok. Thank you for joining us today. Again, apologies it was a solo show. Chris should be back next week, but hopefully we help you win some of your matchups this week and get you on your way to being the quest of the champion of your league. So that's it for the League of Champions Fantasy Show for this week. So I will bid you a good weekend. Best of luck in your matchups, unless you're playing me, of course. Goodbye, everybody.